It was just another Tuesday in the remote border communities of Kebbi State. The harmattan dust hung in the air. Women were preparing evening meals. Farmers were returning from their fields. And then, around midday, the silence was shattered. Thank you for joining us as we piece together what happened on that terrible day. Before we go into the details, I want you to hit that like button and subscribe. This is the kind of story that needs to be told. Not just for the headlines, but for the memory of those who lost their lives. Let me take you to Mamunu village first. It's a small settlement in Arewa local government area, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. At about 1:15 in the afternoon, the villagers heard something they've learned to fear above all else, the sound of motorcycles, many of them approaching fast. Now, at this point, let's understand what happened. These weren't ordinary criminals. These were suspected Lakurawa militants, and they came with a plan. The security report later described it as coordinated attacks on multiple rural villages. This wasn't a random hit and run. This was simultaneous strikes designed to overwhelm any local resistance and force residents to flee in panic. The attackers swept through village after village, Mamunu, Awashaka, Masama, and 5 others. In Mamunu alone, 16 people fell. In Awashaka, 5 more. Masama lost 3, and then 2 each in Tungatoso, Makangara, Kanzo, Gorunaidal, and Danmai-Ago. These were people going about their normal day, a father resting after morning prayers, a mother preparing food, children playing in the compound. Survivors described the attackers as highly organized, firing indiscriminately at anyone in sight. There was no time to run, no time to hide the children. Now, to understand what happened that Tuesday, we need to understand who did this. And this is where the story gets deeper. The Lakurawa didn't just appear overnight. They emerged around 2016 or 2017 in the Gongonu forest area of Sokoto State. Here's the painful irony. They were originally invited by local communities to help fight bandits. Imagine that. Villagers, feeling abandoned by security forces, welcomed armed men who promised protection. The group presented itself as a self-defense force, and locals, desperate for safety, accepted them. Another angle to this issue. The government knew. According to reports, authorities were informed about the group's existence and extreme ideologies years ago, but nothing was done. The police even played down their presence, attributing their arrival to the need for water sources for herding sheep. But by 2023, the protectors had become the predators. The Lakurawa began imposing their own strict version of Islamic law. They collected zakat, religious tax, from herders by force. They monitored local activities, punishing music and dancing. Young men were beaten for shaving their beards or having certain hairstyles. From this point, we need to understand the transformation. The group that came to fight bandits became bandits themselves. They turned to kidnapping for ransom, cattle rustling, and attacking government officials. In November 2024, they killed 15 to 25 people in Mera village in Kebbi. By January 2025, the Nigerian government officially declared them a terrorist organization. But here's where the story gets deeper still. The Lakurawa have been expanding their ties. Starting in 2023, according to researchers at the Institute for Security Studies, Lakurawa fighters began visiting Boko Haram camps in the northeast. Soon, handfuls of Boko Haram fighters began relocating to the northwest.
Now, let us look at this clearly. The Lakurawa are not just another bandit group. They have been linked to the Islamic State, specifically the Islamic State Sahel province active in Niger and Mali. They speak Arabic and Fulfulde. Some of their members came originally from Mali, settling in border communities, marrying local women, and recruiting young men for jihadist activities. What does this mean? It means the terrorism that has devastated the Northeast for over 16 years is now planting deep roots in the Northwest. The tactics are the same, attacking civilian and security targets alike, displacing locals from their settlements, and converting villages into recruitment and training camps. When the shooting stopped on Tuesday, the count was devastating. At least 34 people dead across 8 villages. But here's something that tells you the character of these communities. Some locals didn't just flee, they mobilized. In several villages, residents grabbed whatever they could and confronted the attackers. The police spokesperson in Kebbi, Bashir Usman, later explained what happened. The armed men had invaded the district with the intent to rustle cattle. They had crossed into the area from Gudu local government area in neighboring Sokoto State. Local people from surrounding communities responded to the invasion, and in the ensuing confrontation, 33 persons lost their lives. Now, security forces have moved into the area. The military has deployed additional personnel and operational assets. Tracking operations are underway to cut off the militants' escape routes. But as one community member told reporters, the damage is done. The dead are being buried, the cattle are gone, the fear remains.
Here's something that will send a chill down your spine. Just days before this attack, another community in Kebbi State received a letter. The Utono community in Naski local government area was told that terrorists were coming to preach, and they demanded 100 million naira. The letter read, "This is not a joke. We are coming to preach. You must pay us 100 million naira. If you refuse, you will face the consequences and have no one to blame but yourselves. Even if you call soldiers, they cannot stop us." The group referenced a previous attack on Woru community in Kwara State, where several people were reportedly killed after a similar warning was ignored. The mention of that incident spread panic. The Kebbi State government deployed security personnel and air surveillance, but the attack still came. Just not to Utono, to Mamunu, Awashaka, Masama, and the others. This brings us to the critical questions we must ask ourselves today. How many more warnings will it take? How many more villages must be attacked before we understand that this threat is not going away? And most importantly, why are communities still having to rely on self-defense when the state has the responsibility to protect them? Let's step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Analysts who study this region are terrified by what they see. The International Institute for Counter-Terrorism recently published a paper drawing parallels between Lakurawa and Boko Haram.
Here's the warning. Regarding the growth of the organization and the threat it poses to Nigerian internal stability, given the Nigerian government's helplessness in suppressing the Lakurawa tribe, we must go back about 15 years and remember the birth of Boko Haram in the northeast of the country. It seems that the lessons of the recent past have not been learnt, neither in the Nigerian military nor at the political level. Think about that. 15 years ago, a radical group emerged in the northeast. The government failed to contain it. Today, Boko Haram and its splinter ISWAP have killed tens of thousands and displaced millions. Now, the same pattern is playing out in the northwest. The researchers point out that allowing sub-state actors like vigilante groups to provide security services can be temporarily beneficial but historically counterproductive. These organizations often become violent and hostile toward the citizens they are supposed to protect. That's exactly what happened with Lakurawa. Now let's look at this clearly. Why do groups like Lakurawa find fertile ground in communities like those in Kebbi and Sokoto? One local leader in Sokoto State told the Africa Report, they are displacing and expelling locals from their settlements and converting them to their recruitment and training camp. They assess your level of Islam, but most people fail and they make them their subjects. But before they start displacing people, they first present themselves as helpers. When Lakurawa first arrived in these communities, resistance was impossible. The group portrayed itself as a moral force, and state security actors were conspicuously absent. Malik Samuel, a senior researcher at Good Governance Africa Nigeria, wrote based on first-hand accounts. Many villagers now express deep regret over ever accommodating the group. The theft of cattle, including oxen used to plow fields, have undermined agricultural output and threatens food security across the region. These aren't just security incidents, they are destroying the economic foundation of entire communities.
The threat is growing. According to AC-led data, Lakurawa carried out at least 13 attacks in Nigeria and 8 attacks in Niger in 2025, after carrying out none in 2024. They've expanded their operational reach to the point where they could abduct the Deputy Speaker of the Kebbi State Legislature, Mohammed Samaila Bagudu, holding him for a week and collecting a ransom of over $140,000, some of it paid in CFA francs, the currency used in Benin, Niger, and much of French-speaking West Africa. This isn't just a Nigerian problem. This is a regional crisis. The group operates in the borderlands where Nigeria meets Niger and Benin. Tense relations with Niger's ruling junta since 2023 have hindered security cooperation. Porous borders, weak security relations, and the absence of strong government presence have allowed Lakurawa to grow. As we speak, security forces are conducting tracking operations in the areas around Tuesday's attacks.
The police have reinforced their presence in Bui district, working with the military to maintain stability. Targeted operations are ongoing to track and apprehend the perpetrators, prevent recurrence, and strengthen early warning mechanisms. But the police also issued a warning that deserves our attention. They emphasized that incidents involving armed criminal elements require coordinated security intervention. Members of the public are urged to report suspicious movements through established security channels rather than engage directly, as such confrontations pose grave risks. This is difficult advice for communities who feel they have no one else to turn to. When the attack has come and security forces are far away, what choice do villagers have? It's a question that has no easy answer.
The attacks happened on a Tuesday during the fasting period. Many of those killed were observing Ramadan, seeking spiritual closeness to God when death came to their villages instead. A resident of Kanzu told reporters, "We were in our homes, we heard gunshots. People outside began to run into their shelters. Gunshots hit some people." 34 souls, each with a name, a family, dreams and fears. Each now a statistic in a security report. The bigger lesson for public safety is clear. We cannot rely on reactive measures alone. By the time security forces arrive, the dead are already buried. We need early warning systems that work. We need intelligence gathering that reaches into these remote communities. We need cooperation between locals and security forces that builds trust, not fear. And we need to address the conditions that make young men vulnerable to recruitment. Poverty, marginalization, and the absence of the state create a vacuum that groups like Lakurawa are all too happy to fill. As the sun sets over the villages of Arewa local government, the silence is different now. It's the silence of mourning, of fear, of waiting. Will they come back? Will security forces stay? Will the government finally pay attention? The Lakurawa have shown that they are organized, ruthless, and growing. They've shown that they can strike multiple villages simultaneously, overwhelm local defenses, and melt back into the forest before security forces can respond. They've shown that they are building ties with Boko Haram and aligning with the Islamic State. The question before us now is simple. Will we learn the lessons of Boko Haram before it's too late? Or will we watch history repeat itself, village by village, funeral by funeral? What do you think? Is the government doing enough to protect these remote communities, or are we watching the birth of another insurgency in real time? Drop your comments below. Share this video. Let's make sure these 34 souls are not forgotten.